Hey everyone, I'm Shweta Raj Kumar, and welcome back to another episode of the Period Poverty Podcast. Before we start today's episode, I wanted to say thank you so much for the comments on the last episode. It was truly inspiring to hear people's own stories and to hear feedback on why they liked it. And I hope to continue to spread awareness about this topic through this podcast. That being said, today's main focus is period poverty's impact right here in the US. Although we discussed a lot of these issues last week, I thought we could go more in depth about it this week and apply it domestically. I think this will help us see how this is not only a concern in developing countries, but here as well where we live. So let's talk about it. Here in the US, the issue is more widespread than many of us realize. According to a 2021 study by the nonprofit Period, nearly 1 in 4 people who menstruate struggle to afford period products in the United States. That's 1 in 4 individuals living right here in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It's not just about affordability. Many schools, shelters, and public spaces still don't provide adequate access to menstrual products. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's an ongoing barrier to education, health, and equality. Let's talk about how period poverty is impacting education. In a country where education is key to success, missing school due to menstruation is a huge problem. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, 1 in 5 students in the U.S. have missed school because they couldn't afford menstrual products. For many students, that means missing out on classes, falling behind in school, and ultimately impacting their chances for success. For some, it's not just about missing school. They also face shame and embarrassment when they can't manage their period properly at school. The stigma surrounding menstruation often prevents students from speaking up about what their needs are, leading to more stress and anxiety during what is already a challenging time. This can also be heightened if the school isn't providing them products to help them while they're on their period, especially if at home they're struggling to buy them. The fact that school systems and even colleges are now just starting to offer free menstrual products in some places shows how long this issue has been ignored in educational settings, especially right here in Dublin. There has been a huge improvement in providing period products in the bathrooms, as it's now Ohio law to provide free feminine hygiene products to girls grades 6 to 12. But while some progress is being made, there's still a long way to go. There's also the fact that the lack of education about menstruation in school in general is a main factor that causes negative opinions to arise. Even though it's a normal and healthy cycle, teenage girls have nowhere to depend on if they have any inquiries about their menstruation cycle. The lack of education may affect their actions and timing of meeting doctors. They never know when to seek help if they have any issues with their cycle. Let's talk about the psychological toll of period poverty, which is often overlooked because it's mostly seen as a physical problem, but it's just as important to address. According to BMC's Women's Health, 68.1% of women in the U.S. who reported experiencing period poverty reported symptoms consistent with moderate to severe depression. This means that because of the taboos and stigma around periods and the inability to access products, cause many women to fall into depression. This study also found that young women who had experienced period poverty or monthly period poverty were significantly more likely to report moderate to severe depression because of their financial conditions. This means that period poverty takes a psychological toll on people and can be stressful and isolating to those who have experienced it. Over time, this can be detrimental because the ongoing struggle to access menstrual products can lead to chronic stress, which is a well-documented risk factor for anxiety disorders, depression, and other mental issues. A 2019 study from the Lancet Public Health found that chronic stress from managing menstruation in unsanitary conditions is linked to long-term psychological effects, including an increased risk of developing mental disorders. I think another problem that should be discussed is period poverty and gender inequality, and the psychological effects of this connection cannot be overlooked. overstated. Women who have experienced period poverty often face greater gender discrimination and are treated as less capable or unworthy simply because they menstruate. This can contribute to a cycle of negative mental health outcomes and further reinforce feelings of powerlessness and inferiority. Psychological health is very important, and to be honest, when trying to find sources to back this up, there weren't many I could find that mainly talked about psychological effects, and I think it's a big contributor to the stigma and feeling shame because of period poverty. So it's important to show support and help if you can. Now, let's consider the economic implications of period poverty. Due to humanitarian crisis, natural disasters, and COVID-19, the availability of menstrual products have deteriorated. People who cannot afford menstrual products often face tough choices between buying essential items like food or paying for menstrual supplies. For those living paycheck to paycheck, this can become a constant dilemma. Furthermore, a tax known as tampon tax is levied on menstrual products. Consequently, the cost of menstrual products has increased. Women who cannot afford to acquire period management equipment are burdened more by this charge. This can be proven by a study on menstrual products in the U.S., which shows that tampon tax exacerbates period poverty and has a detrimental impact on women's quality of life by decreasing the accessibility of menstrual products. The cost of menstrual products might not seem like much for some, but for those struggling financially, it can add up. A person spends over $200 a year on period products. In a country where 40% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $400 emergency, that amount becomes significant. But the impact isn't just personal, it extends to the economy at large. People miss work and school due to a lack of access to menstrual products, which results in lost productivity and further economic strain. Period poverty affects not only individuals, but also the economy. Let's now talk about the social stigma. Beyond the practical and economic effects, there's also the social stigma around menstruation that contributes to period poverty. Menstruation is still seen as a taboo subject in many parts of American society, and this stigma creates shame and silence. According to the National Library of Medicine, a study was done in the United States and found that 58% of women were ashamed of having a period, and 51% of men believe that it is improper to discuss periods. Because of this stigma, women are reluctant to talk about their periods. For those struggling with period poverty, this silence can be isolating. It's hard to ask for help when society makes you feel embarrassed about something as natural as menstruation. And for people in marginalized communities, this stigma is often compounded by racial and gender inequalities. Breaking the silence and normalizing conversations about menstruation is one of the first steps towards addressing period poverty. The more we talk about it, the easier it'll be for people to access the help and resources they need. As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear that period poverty is not just a woman's issue or a foreign issue. It's an urgent domestic issue that affects millions of people in the United States. Period poverty hinders access to education, health, and economic opportunities, and it's time we address it as a nation. Thank you for joining me on the Period Poverty Podcast. Together we can ensure that everyone who menstruates in the U.S. has access to the resources they need to live their lives with dignity and respect. I also hope that everyone has gained a little bit of knowledge through these episodes. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to explore other aspects of period poverty. Until then, take care and remember, the more we talk about these issues, the closer we get to finding a solution.